skipping the music today. Hey, everybody, we're going to skip the music. I'm not going to do the music today. No music. We're just going to let her log on. It'll take a minute for it to log on.
No
But
Music
everybody's in the
Wednesday.
house. There you go. Craft Chucky. Howdy, howdy, howdy. So I figured we'd talk in my Nebraska class, what you did over the weekend, with your stuff, and then I want to talk those A tips at 2850 because that stuff was rock star.
Yeah,
I got to shoot that arc, the military stuff, the Hornady Mill, and it was just next level amazing. So make
nice.
sure that was good. Did this go live? Hang on, am I live here? Yep, I guess I am live. I missed my thing. All right, guys, we're here. We're here. Minute in. Welcome to the Everyday Sniper. You got Frank at Sniper's Hide and Chris at RifleKraft. And I just got back kind of yesterday from Nebraska. Evening, everybody. Evening. The toe cutter. Remember the toe cutter. The toe cutter. Who doesn't love coming on with the toe cutter, man? It just brings me flashbacks to when I want to say it was my 16th birthday. Howdy, guys. Mike's on. I got to finally shoot those Hornady. T Blake, I finally got to shoot the Hornady A tips out of the arc, and oh my goodness, they were amazing. So I'm going to talk about that after with the Nebraska class. But I was able to get a hold. Chris, one of the guys at the class, had a whole bunch of the A tips, and so he gave me a box to try through my rifle and chronograph, and I did all the neat stuff. And so I want to talk that later. But Nebraska was hot, 105 and 109 on Saturday and Sunday.
Dude, that's like cruel and unusual.
It really is. Other than we have a covered range though there. They have like a carport, a big one. And so we had a lot of shade, and then there was the wind because it's Nebraska. So we had every morning started out with about a 4 mile an hour wind, and then by the end of the day we were 8 to 12s on both day, which were really good to work the craft wind and to do that because that was that was the weak point because we even had guys two guys who were comp shooters. One of the guys shoots Pawnee. He's from Sterling, and he goes out to Pawnee. And coaching wise, the takeaway was make sure every yard line and everything he's doing, he has a win plan because he'd get a couple good hits, good yard lines, and then he'd kind of roll into the next one and he'd have to chase it, because he wasn't going yard line to yard line with a win plan. So,
Right.
and then, part of it
Um,
is the first day, they sort of rely on my win calls, and my win calls are way too good. So it turns into a thing that they rely on me, and they get kind of I by Saturday afternoon and all day Sunday, I reduced it down to just giving them a mile per hour and see what they would do.
yeah.
Because I didn't want to give them the actual calls, but the newer guys I was giving some calls to because we had Chris, who comes to all the stuff. He had a couple new
Yeah.
guys that were there. One shooting a Savage 308, and then one was on a gas gun. And once we had him cleaned up, he really rock starred his gas gun. He had a 6.5 Creed. Might have been a Sons of Liberty. I don't remember. But he was hammering with his gas gun by mid class, and so yeah, I think that was really good.
I was taking notes at first, and you brought up wind and chasing a plan, but what, like, before you even mentioned that, the question I was going to ask was about wind and brackets. So, like, somehow we've got that mental connection of what are we going to talk about? Um, but I
And
want to hear more
brack
about
and
the class.
yes,
I'm going to
brackets are
circle back
really
to
um I showed them brackets. I had brackets. It took them a minute for them to understand because most of them hadn't heard of bracketing the target with a win call. So I would like go into like however you want to talk brackets. I used your chart from the craft win with the 0.6 and 0.8. And then the nice thing is like Jake had really small targets out to 500, but then 6 he put us a full size IPSC. So I use 6 quite a bit for them, and brackets fit perfect. And so why don't you talk a little bit about win bracketing? Because
Yeah, I mean,
that was a weak
I
point.
could talk about it, but what I wrote down here is I don't see how many people have jumped in yet because he usually picks up like 45 minutes in. It's like, oh, now we got a lot of stuff. I do see the toe cutter, but I don't see the other comments. The
We
first,
got about 25. Well, I don't know what's on Hide. The Hide always has a lot of people, but on the socials right now, we're getting our numbers are starting to chip up. But don't forget on the Hide, those numbers don't come through the eCam, so that's where we get the
yeah,
500-600 people, and it's because that number doesn't appear in eCam, so we only get the Facebook and X count, and so we're good.
right.
You can go into it.
Well, it starts with a couple questions because if you just jump in, I think I'm interested in first knowing who that's listening knows about brackets, and then among those people that know and could explain it, how many of you actually use brackets when you're shooting, or do you end up just chasing, like you make a plan, but in practice, it doesn't get carried through target to target? Because I think that's a big difference. A lot of
Yes.
people could tell you about everything, and then if pressed at a range, that's not what they actually do.
And you know, this was a great weekend for that because when the winds did kick up in the afternoon, they were 8 to 12 with some significant gusts. So the bracket and the targets weren't big. I mean, the 600 was big, the 800 was not, the 1000 they even shot a little tiny plate sub M away. Jake had a big plate, little plate from 900 to 1200. And so we even engaged the little plates. But the wind gusts for me, like I initially shot the 80 grain 6 arc that were going exactly 3,000 feet per second, 3,005 an average. My SD in that ammo was 4. And I ran my chronograph that weekend. So I ran the chronograph at Jake's range to see what that case of ammo would do. I was running 3,000 feet per second, 80 grain, 6 arc, and I bracketed for success. And so I used the bracket because the gusts were bigger than the plate from like 11 o'clock, 11:30 on. Now, we didn't shoot late into the afternoon. We were cleaned up by 4 o'clock because of the heat. But, um, you know, so in order to be successful, I almost always threw a bracket across the plates. And,
Yeah,
you know, until the 80
I think you
grains,
said it.
yeah.
Brackets for success.
Mm-hmm.
Because
So,
what brackets lets you do, it's a little bit like going to Vegas. You're playing the odds in your favor, knowing that any single hand might not work, but in time, if you do enough and you play the odds, you're going to come out ahead,
yes.
right?
It's when you can't decide between two win calls, the high and the low, and when those two win calls, in this case, that 8 and 12, you were kind of close enough. Even on the way up to the 8 and 12, we were still like, a 6 mile an hour wind or a 4 mile an hour wind, a 6 mile an hour gust, a 6 mile an hour wind, a 10 mile an hour gust. So we were all morning, we were inching up to that 8 to 12, 8 to 15 that was coming in. So it allowed me to put the average and the gust on the plate at the same time. So rather than calling that average to the center, I called that average to the leading edge and then let the gust fall on the plate as well with my aim point. And so I did that with the 80 grain because in the wind, after about 800 yards, the 80 grain started to move quite a bit. You know what I mean? I was getting good hits and I was all that, but my wind sort of notched up, you know,
Yeah.
after the fact because the 80 grain is so light.
Yeah. It's spinning fast. It's light, so it's slowed way down, which is going to cause it to yaw into the wind more. And because it's going slow, yeah, it makes sense that it's not going to be linear at that point. It's going to start getting pretty extreme. But it's also why it's so awesome before that. So it's like, well, what are the odds you're
What's
going to
up,
shoot
MILF
past
Dogs?
800? Probably less than inside of 800. So,
Mm-hmm. Once I hit the 1,000 and then I shot the 1,200s and all that, and I did take it all the way out. Um, it's starting to fall off, and I'm using more dope and everything like that, although the heat brought everything down. You know what I mean? We were inching up and the data was starting to come down because one, the wind was, we're shooting a little bit over a dead space underneath us. The 200 to 300 yard targets are down low, then they start going up the hills on the other side into a little canyon and out. But the air, the wind, all of that was able to get under guys' bullets. So they were noticing their dope was getting less and less as the day went on, or from one day to the next. So from Saturday to Sunday, they might have been one number on Saturday, and then Sunday, when it got hotter, they had a new number, which was significantly less. The thermal, the heat, the wind, all together affected our data, as far as elevation and windage went. So we saw all the conditions that could trip somebody up in a field course taking place over the weekend because it was so hot. We had wind that came up significant, and then we had a variety of calibers, but that helped as well because I had a 6 GT on the line. I don't remember if Carson was shooting a dasher. I want to say we had a dasher on the line too. Um, so I don't remember his caliber, but I know Mike, who was shooting next to him, was shooting a 6 GT, and the 6 GT was performing amazing. It did everything that it advertised it was going to do, and it made the shooter look real. Oh, he has 6BR. There you go. Thank you. It was a 6BR. You're correct. Thanks, Killer Joe. Killer Joe. Killer Joe was there with his 308.
6BR is good.
Yeah, he was shooting a 6BR. I knew he had
I've
something
got a
like that.
shitload of 6BR once fired brass. I have a lot, like many thousands of once fired 6BR brass. Somebody wants to buy it. I also have a brand new unopened barrel for impact action. That's 6BR.
There you go.
It's BRA.
Yeah, A is the good one. A. You don't want what is it? The other one's BRX or something, or BR.
Just BR. Just straight up BR.
Well, I thought they had another one that was formed. I know there was the A, and I thought there.
There's fuck ton of them. Yeah, there's like bazillion BR everything something
I
because
had a
you can't just shoot.
I had a brand
Yeah,
new Patriot Valley BR. the Hancock when he was doing that production rifle, Patriot Valley, and I ended up giving it to a little girl that shot Coville. She was like 12 years old or something, and she was shooting the match with a borrowed coyote gun in 223, and she was friggin' cleaning stages. And her dad was like, "Hey, do you remember Cody?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "She's shooting it." I'm like, "Oh, how's she doing?" He's like, "Oh, she cleaned this, and this with a borrowed gun." I said, "You clean these stages with a borrowed gun?" And she's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "You just won a gun."
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
shit, that's not a bad idea for the barrel and stuff too. If I had a impact that I could put it on, we could make a. You know, the BRA shoots factory BR ammo so good that you almost don't need to reload it. You just shoot 6 BR. It just goes a little slow. It's like 2700, or
Yeah.
something like that. 2740 instead of getting closer to 2800. But maybe it's even higher than that. But it's enough slower that but the groups itself, when you fire form it to BRA, makes you question why you didn't just go with BR in the first place.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't, like I said, I had one and I don't like the one. They never, like, originally I had a Savage. We did the Ghost Dancer wit and we did it in 260 and all this stuff. And I was like, I want to do something different with it. And Gardner turned that Savage into a BR for me. And I had 2 cases. Oh, there it is. There is a BRX. It's longer, keeps the shoulder degrees. And, yeah. There was a BRX. I thought there was. Um, and so I had the 6BR, and I have a Savage, and they turned my Savage 110 into a BR with a plate, so it was single feed. But I have a Savage in BR that Gardner did for me years ago. Took the barrel nut off and redid it. It's in the Macmillan of the original Ghost Dancer, and I had 2 cases of Lapua factory BR ammo for it. I had, what is it, like the 95 or 94 grain, and then there was like 100 and something, a light 100, and so I had them running around somewhere. But
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think they're great. They are slow enough that in the applications that we generally talk about, but in bench rest, it crushes. So
yes,
it's not
yeah.
that it isn't accurate. It's just you got to control the conditions a little bit.
Well, and that's why they call this stuff barricade bench rest, because they do the BR, they do the dasher, and they do the bench rest calibers. So you get the barricade bench rest moniker because they move to,
And the weight of the rifles.
and the
Yeah,
weight of the
yeah. It's
rifles over 20 pounds, you know what I mean? So yeah, then you're in barricade bench rest mode. So you have a 6 millimeter BR that weighs 26 pounds and, shooting
yeah.
targets and shit with it.
But
So
but circling back to the now I have 5 pages I got to look at. Um, Brackets and win. You know, without giving it too much thought. I mean, because we just came up with it. I, you know, to me, that answer, or at least the hypothesis, would be it takes too much mental bandwidth to be aware of stuff while you're doing other things because those other things haven't been put on a lower cost operating system by training. And if you don't have the bandwidth to think through what you have to do for brackets, you just simply can't do it under stress when your
right.
brain is thinking about stuff that it probably shouldn't. And that the explanation is you could get there, but it takes work. Nobody wants to do work.
Well, that's it.
um
It's, you got to have both. You have to record the high, the low. You have to be there for more than a minute and watch the wind and what it's doing and give it time to make its change cycle happen so you can note the change cycle that's taking place in the yard line and in the moment. But that's part of it. And I know, like, for me, I was throwing those brackets on, because one, not knowing 100% what that 80 grain was going to do under those conditions. I just haven't been behind the 80 grain in that enough, and I'm just still getting my feet under me with that arc. I kind of ran numbers and looked at the muzzle velocity and tested it all, but I haven't gotten used to it yet, just with the
I
move and
think
with.
that's important. That's important. And I think that if people are listening and it didn't light a bulb that shows how much you've shot and how it's become a part of you that's not even it it bypasses having to say it out loud because it's just who you are. When you shoot enough, when Frank says, "Well, I'm not as familiar with it," he knows everything that he needs to know. So you would think, well, that's all you need to know. And that's also why I think a lot of very high end competitors shoot one rifle, one caliber, one speed, because you can, for lack of a better word, intuit how it's going to behave because you're watching it do subtle things that aren't necessarily any one checklist item. You know how it behaves because you just shot it and watched it, and you can see, like, man, something happens at 800 that might not be something that shows up on a kestrel, and it might not be something that, but when you shoot all calibers, it's very hard to, I mean, you can do it, but when it's a new caliber and you're really trying to be at the level of saying, I know how this is going to behave, you have to have so much time shooting it and seeing what happens that you stop marking down, like, noted, saw this, noted, saw this, and you start accounting for it while you're shooting. Kind of like,
Yeah.
I mean, Jacob describes movers not as a put in the speed and you hold here and then you shoot when it gets to the subtension, but he talks about it like throwing a baseball,
Yes.
right? Like if you're running or a football or some kind of ball, if somebody's running across, you could throw a ball and they'll meet. Well, you could say there was a lead. If you knew the speed and you knew the distance, you could know the lead and you could know I got to throw it now.
Yeah, yeah.
But he says if you do that, you hesitate. What's left out of that conversation is he has movers at his house and he shot a lot of movers just like a kid would throw balls until they realized, oh, they're there. I got to throw it like this. And you can assess the distance with your eyeball and throw a ball to a running person at all kinds of distances, and it never comes to the level of conscious thought. So Jacob's answer is just shoot a lot at movers till you can do it just like throwing a ball.
Yeah.
But if you give
And
him a new caliber, he won't do that,
right. Right.
right?
You got to relearn it. And that's funny cuz I have a mover, like I have a 20-minute mover PowerPoint. It's very short. And Mark put in, because Mark will, when he was in Alaska, he would sit at the high-end bar in Alaska there that was across from his shop, and he would talk to, doctors, lawyers, this guy, this guy, this guy, so smart people. And so he was talking to a doctor about movers. And the doctor's like, yeah, you have a gland in your head why humans are good at ball sports and we can chase things. We play hockey well, we play football well, we play baseball well, and it's chasing a ball. We have a gland, an ipso facto thing in our head that allows us, I have the scientific term. Um, we have that uh thing that lets us chase animals and little animals, and we can run them down. And so that allows us to be really good at ball sports. And so that is a big element of it that is built into our brains, that we can visualize that kind of thing. And it's crazy, to think that we could take that primal Neanderthal, chase a rabbit and run it down to eat, and turn it into a sport, and send a hockey puck across and pick it up, kick a soccer ball, throw a football in traffic and hit our target. All that stuff comes from that same location.
Which I'm going to make a big jump forward here, supports the idea of a reticle as a single dot,
Yes.
because you're looking at the terrain, not the reticle. And looking at terrain, you'll be able to assess where you got to hold based on the terrain, not on a reticle subtension. But you've got to shoot a lot to be able to
Right.
do that.
Right. A whole lot.
So you get the shortcut of the holds, the leads with a reticle to get some people marginally effective, but to be an NFL player and a quarterback, it's beyond that,
Mm-hmm.
right? They won't say, "Oh, I'm holding 1.2." They would want a reticle that was a single aim dot. Um, but it demands skill set and training that's different than traditional. And people want traditional, what they heard, what their uncle told them. But that holds you back ultimately from high end development.
Well, I mean, even like Joe's on here, he was shooting a 308 truck gun, or a little shorty. I think it was a 308. Yeah, he was 308. 308 Sig Cross. Little short 308 Sig Cross. And, it was like swinging that heavy bat. And then he jumped on Mike's GT, and it was like he was on it. It was on fire and couldn't miss. You know what I'm saying? And it's one of those cases where your equipment, like, he does everything right. Even had like a little bigger bipod, where he had a larger Atlas Cal on there, and it gave him that good stability. He's getting right. He's not, but then it's the 308 in the wind, and it's a short Sig Cross 18-incher with a light barrel that got hot on him in the heat. You know what I mean? So it started to wander a little sooner than it might have if it wasn't 100 degrees out. So you look at all these elements and you're like, is that me or is that the rifle? Why am I not holding as well as I could? And it's all these factors that come into play, that you think, I got my rifle, I'm good, I grab it, I walk outside, and 4 rounds, if he wasn't there doing everything with 4 rounds, 3 up, 3 down, the fifth round started to wander a bit on him because of the heat in the 308. You know what I mean? He would throw a flyer. Then the flyers got a little bit more if he went to 8 rounds. Then he backs off and manages it to that 4 rounds or less, and it's a solid hit, a solid hit. But then get to 6 rounds and he throws a flyer. Well, we put this guy on a 6 GT, and never happens. You know what I mean? He's just hit, 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 scoring everything across the board, even small little targets out. So you run into, hey Jim and Kyle, you run into a lot bigger variation for a lot more reasons than everybody wants to process. You know what I mean? It's like, well, this should work as advertised. Why doesn't
Yeah.
it? And it's the heat, it's the barrel contour, it's a suppressor on it, it's the caliber, it's the wind that's coming up, it's the thermals from that little valley underneath us, and the heat and the wind can get under the bullet. So you start running into all these variations and factors that aren't neon signs. And so it's like, where did it come from? And that's where you have to be realistic and say, listen, man, you're executing, you're doing all this right. And, even with some of them, it's like Ben, one of the guys had a RPR. It was like, Ben, man, you're dancing with this RPR. You're out shooting what I feel is a factory RPR. And his everything he was doing to me was beyond the gun. And it's like, how many rounds do you have through this barrel? And he was right around 2 grand or getting up there. And it's like, now's a good time to consider rebarreling the RPR, upgrading it a little bit, adding a little bit of, you know, better than factory in the equation because you've moved past factory. Even the Savage guy, there was some nervousness in own things, but you shoot your Savage till you get to a point, then you should be at the point of outgrowing it and needing a better barrel on it. Maybe a better stock that doesn't flex. A scope that travels. Like the one rifle, we had a rifle on the line, Savage again, that ran out of elevation the way it was set up. He was holding at 9 to 1,000 and beyond because he ran out about 800 yards in elevation the way the rifle showed up. So you run into all these things that not even a newer shooter, but an intermediate shooter may not consider on his journey if nobody ever explained to them to consider it. And so that's kind of where I think the class has benefit and things come in to, at the end of the day, to say to these guys, hey, try rebarreling that and see if you get a little bit more out of it because you're kind of shooting better, and if you got 2,000 rounds down it, you sort of have your money's worth. You know what I mean? Today, barrels are tires. So if you got 2,000 miles out of a tire that's not going to get any more really than 5,000, you're halfway there and your skill set is putting you on the track. Well, you should buy track tires. You know what I mean? You wouldn't say, hey, I got 3,000 more miles of tire life. Let me go to the track. And,
Yeah.
you would just say, no, I'm going to go to the track, but I need brand new tires for that. And that's kind of how I feel where some of these guys are when we see them in class that are doing really well. They're watching the videos, they're out there, and they have a want to learn. And you see they're putting in the effort. And when you see that, that's where I'm not afraid to recommend to somebody next level equipment, next level.
Yeah. So you know Buck, that I don't know if he still works at Loophole, but at least he used to. Uh, you know what I'm talking about?
Who again works where?
Buck from Loophole,
Yes, yes.
the Marine. Yeah. Anyway, it's his story, and I'm going to butcher it, so I'm not going to tell it completely. But I think it's relevant only for context, and not that it agrees with everything, but it's interesting because he's a good experienced shooter. He taught. He's done a lot of great stuff. Smart, involved, and he does courses sometimes. And he was telling me about this one time that reshaped how he thought about teaching and shooting, and even kind of backed away from some stuff because he taught a class in Canada, and there was a student that sounds kind of like what you're describing, where they decided maybe I should take a class, and it was close. But they're so good, and nothing that they do makes sense. This guy was like in his 50s or 60s, and he was a rancher, and he bought a rifle as a teenager, and he was still shooting that rifle. Nobody told him about barrel life. Nobody told him about anything. He just bought the gun because they had to shoot coyotes, and for 4 or 5 decades shot coyotes. And he said, wait a minute, like the groups weren't bug holes, but it was like, when he shot paper, it was like inch and a half. But he didn't shoot paper. Um, but he didn't miss any targets, but he didn't have data. He knew where to hold with wind and distance because, and he did the math, and it was something like over 10,000 rounds through his barrel. He only shot when he needed to shoot a coyote. But remember, he's like in his 50s or 60s. He didn't know about
Right. He
any
didn't
of the
know what he
stuff
didn't
in the
know.
class. He didn't know any of the stuff from class, but when it came time to shoot, he hit everything. And he was like, wait a minute, what are you doing? And he goes, well, I'm just shooting it. Like, but yeah, but what are you dialing? Where are you holding? He goes, well, I'm just shooting it because it's like how I shoot a coyote. And and it like blew his mind. It's a good story. He's gonna have to tell it, but it makes you wonder if somebody isn't told all the nonsense that's on social media and is allowed to explore and develop that intuition. Because you can't, if you're told like, here's the checklist of stuff, like somebody's like, oh, I got money, I'm gonna learn how to do this, and I'm gonna become an expert immediately. They're so focused on that list that they're not really feeling and getting the feedback from they're not believing the bullet.
Yeah, yeah.
And this guy, the only thing he ever had was believing the bullet.
Well, and that was Joe. Because Joe on paper shot like a 2-inch group. But as soon as Joe went to steal, and even Mark was saying all weekend, Mark was laughing, going, Joe, you got to shoot a group for somebody and then bet him on distance. Because he would have a much better hit rate at distance with the rifle. But when you put him at 100 yards on paper, the group was terrible looking. It did not look good. And then when he went out to distance, he would have a much higher hit rate, and it was his group on steel was not the same as his group on paper. Right, Joe? Right? Mark's
Well,
like, hey Joe, you should go around and bet people paper versus steel. And it was because it's easier to project out there and to visualize, and then to try to hold a group on something that's not 100% in the shooter's control, which is the heat and the light barrel. You know? Yeah, he was 3M away on paper. It was bad the first day. He's laughing. It was 3M away on paper. He was 1M away on steel. You know what I mean? It was that kind
huh.
of a disconnect, and because it's the wind call, it's just the way it was, and the wind was so shifty, and he's running a 308. He was adjusting almost every shot to shot because you had to, and so he was keeping himself in the plate. But then when he's at 100 yards holding center, he had a 3M away group, and it was like,
Yeah. I mean, it just shows that there's so much more we don't get, but we can get it eventually by shooting a lot, and that intuitive sense, and also just letting go of some of the fixations that people have on, but it has to be this, it has to be this, because if somebody shoots a point 0.1 group on paper but can't hit a point 0.9 piece of steel, like, that's terrible. But if somebody shoots point 0.6 and then they hit every target that's point 0.6 or bigger, they're doing everything right because the system, the cone of fire
right.
is. But I think up close, it might, today might not be the day for it, but we mentioned it last week and I've continued to obsess about it. Parallax and the diopter are a big deal when you're shooting at close ranges, right? And the fatigue that your eyes gets is a big deal if you're going to shoot a lot or look through a scope a lot. And so it seems very important to me right now to think about it more because you have to not have your eye get tired if you're going to be shooting all day. And if you're going to be shooting at close ranges, it can cause huge amounts of problems to not have those accurately adjusted. But
Yeah,
I
totally.
don't think most people can actually do that.
Hopkins, I didn't see the light gun explode. I didn't see the Remington video of the gun explode. I haven't really been online like that. And yeah, you guys, everybody's right. Everybody's coming up with the old guy, fear the man with one gun. He may know how to use it, and that adage is very relevant. We see it quite a bit when guys bring that one rifle that they have, and they tend to
Right.
do very well with it. And
Right.
just to kind of get it intuitive, and it does work out that way. But it was a it's always great to see what people bring to class, the variations in the equipment, and you got two 308s in class. You have brand new, like Mark's son was there with a brand new 6.5 barrel from Mile High and an AI. So you got a brand new AI, but he's there with his buddy who's got a Howa in an Oryx stock from MDT with a budget scope. Like his whole thing is a budget build, and Corey's hammering. And he's got a budget
Yeah.
build. And here's another guy who's shooting above his weight class with budget build, but just holding hard, hitting well. And you get that, the different dynamics of people who are coming in. Like I said, Ben with the RPR, and then the gas gun in the class, and watching that. And then, you know, there's a semi-custom with one of the guys, Andy, who was a new shooter, and once we got Andy into a place, was shooting amazing. But in the beginning, Andy couldn't press he was tapping the trigger like it owed him money. He was the pimp, and that was the whore, and he was getting every dollar out of her. And he's slapping that friggin' trigger like a pimp. And once we get him settled in, he's hammering, he's hammering, he's hammering, and you see somebody who has a decent rifle that was well built, who isn't shooting to its potential, and then you see them come into their potential with that rifle, and it changes. Now then, Saturday night into Sunday, it's what rifle do I buy? What rifle do I buy? What rifle do I buy? You know what I mean? And then that's
Yeah.
what happens next. So
Yeah. At my
it
class 2 weeks ago, the guy that outshot everybody had never shot before. He was an archer and he wanted to get into hunting. He had ordered a rifle, but it didn't have it, so he borrowed my AI. But he was listening so carefully and trying so hard just to do what was said that all of the people with experience, he outshot him, not only in the practice days, but in the final hunter match exercise, which shows you that your mind, it's not that everyone else couldn't and that everyone else's rifles shot fine. Their minds weren't
yes.
on the things that they needed to do. They were thinking about, I mean, it has to be the answer is that rather than focus on what works, they must have thought they could outsmart fundamentals. And it doesn't work like that, right?
No, and the no mind thing, I put it in the book, and I want to say it's like right in the beginning.
I gave them all a copy of the
Oh,
book
here it
too.
is. So page 9, which is really chapter 1, like, oh, got to come this way. So chapter 1, right here on the other page, right? So page 9 in the book, it says so the teacher cannot overcomplicate lessons. Less is more when it comes to the style of a martial art. In the words of the great samurai Tom Cruise, no mind. We mind the crowd, we mind the task, we mind our performance. We overthink the process to the point it inhibits our success. Listen to what Tom Cruise character Nathan Algreen learns in The Last Samurai. Know mind. Confidence comes in the form of knowing your process so you can't make the mistake. You know what I mean? I wrote that. That's in the first section of the book, is that we overthink it and that we come in.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
you nailed it.
Yeah.
And I
No
like
mind.
that you refer to Tom Cruise as a
I love,
samurai.
you know what? Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt are the two best actors in the world, man. Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt. If you had to do a man and a woman, Tom and Emily. But no, Chad, part of it is they don't have bad habits. So people who haven't shot, if they get instruction up front, they like women for bolt guns are really really good because women don't have the history, they don't have the bad habits, because they're coming into a man's skill set, which is shooting. They listen when they're taught, and so women immediately get better faster. Men think they're the best at firing guns, fighting, and fucking, right? We fire a gun better than anybody. We fight better than anybody, and American men especially, right? Firing guns, fighting, and fucking. And then we can fuck anybody better than the other guy. So it's all those three things that cloud our mind and don't let us progress to the next level that women don't have. And if you get somebody who didn't grow up with firearms, who then take a class or are taught and listen and pay attention, their learning curve is much smaller than someone else. You know what I mean? Who's been doing it wrong their entire life. It's the sports medicine. 3,000 repetitions to build a new positive neural pathway, 9,000 repetitions to fix a bad habit. And those 9,000 repetitions have to be perfect. That's a Jacobism. You know what I mean? And so if you're at 7,000 repetitions and then you get into a bad 2 weeks of your life and are lazy and doing it fucked up again, you got to start all over because you've reinforced that bad habit. So for somebody to break a bad habit, it is so hard. And then when you bring in people who don't have the habit and learn it right the first time, they're so much better off than the rest of us.
So, do you think it's no bad habits, or do you think it's they think rather than doing what they're supposed to be doing in a class, or if you say do these things that work, what they're actually doing is so and so told me this, or I can outsmart it by doing this,
Some try.
and you see it as this isn't working, so they double down on it versus like, what do I have to do it right? And they're not thinking, all these people told me this is the way to do it. And they're saying do it this way, but they're full of shit because it doesn't match what these people say. So I'm gonna do what they're saying and tell them I'm doing what they're saying, and because you can't see what they're thinking. But when push comes to shove, you can extract that in conversation. Like, so
Yeah,
what?
two.
What's happening? Well, because I think it's gonna be this. It's like try it this way, just for fun.
Well, because we do the fundamental eval first thing before anything's taught. You'll let those people do their own thing, and they never shoot as well as they expect on command. So Mark calls the fundamental eval the humbler because it humbles that mind that thinks they already know it or already done it. You know what I mean? And so that's one part of it. And then in our class, we because like one somebody's almost always watching a shot on paper. If we know I have to watch you and we're shooting paper, I'll go by the guys I know I need to keep an eye on during the relays on paper, and I'm watching their fundamentals because I saw something I didn't like earlier. But on steel, it's like Mark. I'm on glass. Mark's on them. We try to catch them from falling back into those problems. So we're on you in the beginning. That first day, we're telling you, stop doing that, stop doing that, stop doing that. And then if you come in on Saturday and you're still doing it, somebody's going to camp out in your space, Mark, and bother you, right? You're doing it, and no grown man wants to be hit and poked like that every time. You know what I mean? So they'll learn a little. Like Andy was slapping the trigger like crazy all weekend, and he even told him, he goes, Frank listens. He's gonna bet me on Sunday against you. He's gonna try to take my money because you're not listening and doing it right. I need you to do it right, or I'm gonna lose money because Frank's over there grinning because you keep slapping the trigger. Because what's going to happen is we're going to do the final eval on Andy. I'm going to pull money out of my pocket behind Andy's back, and I'm going to show the money to Mark. And that means I'm betting against Mark that Andy's going to fuck up. And so Mark sees that, and he's like, you got to do it right, or I'm losing money. And like, the worst thing you can ever do to Mark is take $1 from him. Joking, but if I take Mark's dollar, he's pissed. And so he'll
Well, it's
do,
the principle.
he'll
Yeah,
do
it's a friendly
everything he
wager.
can. But Hopkins is talking about a Jacob story, and I was there for that. Talking about Jacob intentionally, um, intentionally making someone miss. So we had a competition at Rifles Only where the instructors got to shoot it. I shot it, Jacob shot it, Lindy shot it, we all shot it. So we did a comp. And we were shooting a mover where you had a green balloon and 2 red balloons. And you had to shoot the green balloon and not hit the red balloons. We just put sticks up on the mover and we put the balloons together in a row, and you had to shoot the red one and not the 2, or the green one and not the 2 red ones. Right? So I go, and it's not hard, honestly. It really wasn't hard. I go and I shoot it, and Jacob's going to shoot after me. And he Babe Ruthed it. Before he walked up, he told me, he came over to me and whispered in my ear. He goes, I'm gonna hit the no shoot and watch everybody behind me. And Jacob hits the no shoot target on the mover. Now, this is a time when Jacob was unbeaten in any competition. If Jacob went to a comp, he won. And he was giving away rifles, he was doing everything. So he was, it was a known thing. Jacob's there, you're coming in second. Well, he misses, he hits the no shoot, and everybody, it was like like the tenants crowd gasped. It was an audible gasp, like, oh my God, Jacob hit the wrong target. Like, I want to say there was 40 people after Jacob to shoot the stage. 30 of them missed and hit the no shoot because he did. It took like 30 people to get it out of their system, like this wasn't hard. But 30 people said, well, Jacob couldn't do it, so I can't do it. Lost Chris there for something. What did I don't remember. What did I do to you in 2014? Who knows what I did? But anyway, it's absolutely possible to get in someone's head. You know what I mean? It's a mental game. There's so much that we have going on that way that oh, the power died. The computer got unplugged by Riley. I didn't notice. Hang on. He'll come back. His power cord got unplugged. But he'll jump. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that it's absolutely, our mind. And that Tom Cruise line is so important, that it's a martial art. You know what I mean? Shooting is a martial art. And our head tells us so much. I mean, even with me, like I tell people all the time, I sort of lost that competitive gene. I don't have that want at a competition to like do great. You know what I mean? I don't really care how I do anymore. I'm not looking to impress anybody. If I get tired, I slow down. If I'm, whatever the case may be, there he is. I beg off. There you are. And
Hey,
so,
yeah, I
yes, no, I was
texted
just
you. I
talking
was
about Jacob and the head thing. But that's absolutely it. That there is such a huge mental element. And even when you and I did some mentoring with some of your guys, and we were pushing them one more target. Go up to your stage, shoot 3 targets. Go up to your stage, shoot 4 targets. Go up to your stage and shoot 5 targets. There was a point of mental breakdown. There's a point where you just can't, or not everyone can, mentally remember. And that's why they do it now in these matches, because they're not stressing you physically. They can't. They don't have the space. They don't have the want. They're not going to make you run around the location a couple times. So the only game they have is a mental game. You got to memorize the target order, and you got to go back and forth between, shoot the red one, then the green one, then the blue one, and you got to memorize that. And you go to a point where X number of people will fall down, myself included. You know what I mean? And so there is so much to that mental aspect that people underestimate, right?
for sure, for sure. I mean, that is one of the harder aspects to work on for the high level people, especially with the way shooting competitions are designed. They're designed around an expected hit percentage to begin with. So when it's off from that, people haven't worked on that to buffer because, I heard some feedback. There was an NRL Hunter match that was no points, like a non-competitive one, as a trial kind of thing, and I heard it was hard. And I was like, that sounds awesome. But I think a lot of people, because it was so hard, got deflated rather than motivated.
Right.
And that can be worked on, but you can't just say, like, oh, yeah, it's not going to bother me. If it bothers you, it bothers you. But there's got to be a way to get past, because your brain knows you're lying to it. That you
Right.
don't want
Right.
to lie to your brain. Um, you want to find a way to make it a good thing instead of a negative. And the good thing is, it told you what to work on to get
Yes.
better,
Yes.
rather than go and have a feel good.
Well, I mean, in you made me a better shooter because I had tremors, and you taught me how to address the trigger. Right, right, right. Never forgotten. Yeah. So, and that's the thing, is we want every student to improve. You know what I mean? We're looking for our students to improve and to go away better than they showed up. We don't want somebody to go home and be like, well, I shot better before I showed. I mean, because you do get people who have adapted to their bad habits. And so they'll shoot prone really well, but they can't shoot positional. They'll shoot off a bench really well, but they'll complain endlessly about prone. Their neck hurts, their shoulder hurts, their elbow hurts. And so once you take someone out of their comfort zone and they fall down, the question is, do they stand up and step up, or do they stand up and walk away? And you do see people who will walk away. Well, I don't do that at home. I'm not going to do it here, so I don't care. And that's a bad attitude, and we see that. I mean, we get people who are belligerent, and it just happens. And people who will start to tell them, and they'll snap at us, I'm not ready yet. Or it's like, well, you're addressing the rifle wrong, and we don't want you to do that. We want you to address the rifle correct. We want you to go from A to Z correctly, not start at D, because I'm getting ready A, B, C, and I'm not ready yet. But A and B and C matter. You can't start it at D. And so you'll get that and so we're pretty tough that way that we don't necessarily cut them slack. I mean, anymore we try not to be insulting, but we'll crack a joke that'll hurt a feeling, and it happens.
Yeah, I mean that I I I'm trying to like relate to if because you could see things in students that obviously I probably have areas of my life that I'm doing the same thing, but you can't see that, so it has to be pointed out. But when you point it out to a student, it's the only way they're gonna know. Like if I do something that's like that, I might not be aware that I'm doing it. So somebody points it out, and rather than say, "Oh, you're such a fucking asshole! I can't believe whatever," but then you're like, "Oh shit, cool. I'll work on it." But I think it all comes back to some people want to work and some don't. There was a when I started rock climbing at a higher level, there was a one of the best climbers in the world said to get to the highest level, there's a lot of stuff that people have to figure out to do diet, exercise, training, blah blah blah. And he said, if you really want it, that what Wendell made me think of this. If they learn if they want it. His answer was very simple. He said, if you really truly want to be at the level that you're talking about, all of that stuff will happen.
Yeah.
You'll just do it,
Yes. Well,
and
and
it won't be an issue. It won't be a problem. It won't be a sacrifice. You'll do anything it takes, and you'll know what you need to work on because it'll be the areas that you're not good at.
yeah. And like me for comps, I'm that way. I haven't gone back. Like I did terrible at the match here, and I grabbed stuff and I wasn't ready. My dope was off a couple 2/10, which was an issue. But I haven't gone back there and put myself on a clock and shot a stage because it doesn't bother me. I don't care. I know where I am. I just do my normal thing, and it's like, oh, that's wrong. That's wrong. I'll go and fix my dope. Okay, you know
But if
what?
it
But I'm not
if it was
trying.
super important to you, you'd do it, and it
Absolutely,
wouldn't
but
even be an
I've
issue.
reached a
Yeah,
point now I don't have to. So I'm not because I'm being lazy in that respect. But if it mattered to me, if somebody said, if somebody was mother effing me and, oh, Frank, and I needed, the only way I was going to get out of that cycle was to do well in a match, I'd practice and do well at a match. And then I'd knock it
right,
out and go, see, fuck you, I did it. But I've been to
right.
so many matches, I've been to so many places. I no longer feel I have anything to prove. If somebody wants to point out I didn't do as well, it's like, yeah, I didn't really care. I didn't practice. I didn't train. My dope was off 2/10, and it is what it is.
If
I'm
somebody
good.
points it out, though, it's their problem, not yours.
Well,
Like they have
but
issues.
early on, even in Colorado, early on when I went somewhere and my name was on the list, I had people walk up to me and go, "Oh, I saw you were here and I just wanted to beat you." And it's like, "What'd you want to beat me for? What'd I ever do to you?" It's like I never met
Right,
you.
right.
And they'd be
But
like, "Well, I
there's
want to."
always guys like that. There's
Yeah,
always guys like that.
always they'll come up to you and be like, "Oh, I just wanted to beat you," and then they run around the internet and you'll run into somebody and say, "Oh, John told me he beat you in a match," and be like, "Good for John, I didn't care," good for him,
Right.
and so you get that, you hear it, and so it can be a case where somebody will chase that down because they're so afraid that John's gonna say. No, I'm not teaching any of that, Chad. I'm teaching fundamentals. I do a little fam on tripods, but I don't teach PRS. I don't teach bench rest, and I don't teach F class. You know, I'm
Just shooting. If
I'm just
people that
teaching
take
fundamentals
those
of
classes,
marksmanship and shooting and how to be a better shooter. Now I'll be a fam fire. I'll do like I had a 3-day class. We teach the basics. We teach guys. Now if you want to get off your belly and do different things, absolutely. But it's I tell people I'm building a foundation. What house you put on that foundation, it could be PRS, it could be bench rest, it could be F class. I don't care. But I want you to
right,
walk away from my class understanding the fundamentals of marksmanship, understanding your rifle system and what it takes to hit a target. And then from there, which direction you go is on you. If you want to build a prissy gun and you want to do that, have at it. If you want to do something else, that's fine. But I'm giving people that foundation to go in any direction they want to go. Fairbanks, AK's in the house. What's up,
yeah,
Fairbanks? You got snow
yeah.
yet? Where's what those
You
fire
make
plants at?
better shooters,
Right.
right?
I'm just
You
making a
you
better
just make better
shooter.
shooters.
Where that better
Yeah,
shooter wants to go in his journey, because this is a journey, right? Where that better shooter wants to go in his journey is up to that shooter. But I'm giving you a foundation. Like we had guys, they're asking and they're doing ELR. They came to my class and they go, hey, we want to go see somebody ELR. Or Chris brought some people to Spear Point and took a class. It's like, great, you went and shot ELR with these people, you took their class. When he went, Prissies, man, you don't know what a prissy is? Prissies, a PRS. It's a PRS shooter's a prissy. So prissies, man, they have specific guns, right? They have a 20 plus pound 6mm. It's a prissy gun. It's a barricade bench rest gun. So if you build a barricade bench rest gun in some, dasher, you're not going to do anything else with your dasher but shoot a prissy match. So
right.
yeah, you're shooting a prissy gun. And so if
I,
he wants to go build a dasher and go shoot prissy shit, go do that. If you want to build a 25 Creedmoor and shoot NRL Hunter, go do that. Learn that game. But when you show up with somebody's NRL Hunter class, you're not a bag of dicks. You look like you know what you're doing. You got dope, you can execute the shot, and you understand those kinds of fundamentals. You know what I mean? Then you have that guy give you the tips and tricks of NRL Hunter, the tips and tricks of PRS. And you have a foundation, and so that's where my mind is and how I teach it. Because I'm not trying to put somebody in a box. I'm trying to
right,
build a foundation that lets you do whatever you want on top of it.
right. Yeah, I think like part of human brains, every I don't have this, but what comes to mind is somebody goes out to eat, they get food poisoning, and they never eat that kind of food again. Like it, it has nothing to do with the type of food it is, right? Like usually it's a bacteria that got
Right.
in, and it was a one-time thing, but they can never eat that food again. So like, and but yet people do with everything. Like, oh, a negative experience, I'm gonna block it all out. But it's
Yeah.
at some point like you're gonna have to live in a black dark room with pads in it because
I went to Alaska. I ate at Sweet 100. I got food poisoning the whole drive up to friggin' Willow, man. I was puking and you name it. And all night I was there. I missed the whole friggin' night, getting sick the next day. Every other time we went up to Alaska again, I still went back to Sweet 100 and ate dinner. You know what I mean? I
right.
got
But some people
unlucky
put up
one.
that wall,
Yeah, I got
like
unlucky one time and I had a bad meal and it happens, but it's not like I had a lot of choices in Alaska. And so, but I've had food
right.
poisoning and I went back and ate, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
but it's one of those curious things that you
Yeah.
hear it a, a lot, considering you interacting with other people that you say like, "Hey, how about Mexican food?" Oh no, I got food poisoning once, and I can't eat Mexican food ever again. Like, what the fuck? Like,
Right, right.
all right,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you probably did. I used to make fun of Major Plaster because Major Plaster's book was kind of plagiarized a bit. Major Plaster wasn't a sniper. He just had access to material, and then he wrote his book based on that stuff. Oh, 8-4 Tactical and Sniper Side. Yeah, yeah. John McQuay. He's a nice dude. Nowadays the algorithms frowns on any gear now. Yeah, there's so much. The algorithms are terrible with that stuff. But John and all that
I
was a
used to
thing.
listen to that podcast. Like I liked it a lot. I don't know if it's still happening, but
Which one is that?
the 85
Oh,
41.
his mail call?
I
Yeah,
liked how
John's
he
mail.
talked
Well,
about
he
stuff.
went
Yeah.
to cuz he's a police officer. He went to more handgun and carbine. I think his job in the police department might have changed. And
Oh,
you know the funny thing too, John was in my unit in the Marine Corps as well. John was in one too, just like 15 years after I was. But John is a 1-2 Marine as well as I was a 1-2 Marine. And but I think he switched from some bolt gun stuff more to handgun and carbine because of his police job. So I
gotcha.
haven't
Yeah, I
seen
like
John
the
even
way
at
his
SHOT Show.
perspective was always healthy
Yeah, yeah,
and open and thoughtful.
yeah. John
Yeah,
McQuay.
good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, and that's just it. And so the other thing I wanted to jump in before, because we're already kind of in the hour, is I did shoot the 106 grain Hornaday 6 arc military match, the army stuff that they gave away, or not gave away, but sold at Shields. It's a plain brown box, has a sticker that says like mill match on it, and it's a 106 grain A tip. And Chris had a bunch, and so I put it through my 6 arc. Um, avoid Sweet 100. Yeah, Captain Cook's better, for food. Even Fletcher's, but and downstairs at Cook instead of going upstairs, and then Sullivan's you got. But anyway, so I got to shoot them, and I chronographed them. I ran them. The 80 grain VMAX Hornaday 6 arc was going 3,005 feet per second. I think it's like Chris had it, and he said the shelves at his Shields were full of it, and he bought them from that. I haven't gone into a Shields. There's one around here that I got to go down and find. But anyway, so I got to shoot it. And I chronographed it. So my 80 grain, 3,000 feet per second, an SD of 4 was right around 78 to or 7.8 to 80 feet per second to hit 1,000 yards. So I'm right around 3,000 feet per second, 80 grain bullet, 6 arc, SD of 4, about 8 mils to 1,000 yards in Nebraska. I'm shooting the 6 arc A tips 106. They're 2850, like on the dot, like 2855 out of my rifle. The SD was not great. It was in the 20s, but I was only 7.2 mils to 1,000 yards. So the 80 grainers are right around, I want to say 3.4. 3.2. The 80 grainers were 3.2 at 1,000 yards. The 106 was 3.0 at 600. So 3.2 at 600 for the 80 grainers. I said 1,000 at 600. 3.2, 80 grain, 600 yard, going 3,000 feet per second. 106 A tip at 2850 was 3.0 mils to 1,000 or to 600. So 3.0 to 600, 7.2 to 1,000, and 9.4 to 1,200. I hit repeatedly at 1,200 with 9.4. So that's how good the A-tips in the 6 arc at that 2850. Same thing now when you look at guys doing the 120 grain at 2850. Got reached out with the 6x47 at 2850. Guys are pushing the 6 creeds a little better than 2850 with the 120 grain. Yes, it was repeatable and accurate. The A-tips were amazing. It was just it was push button easy shooting the 6 arc A-tips 106 grain at 2850. Hammer, hammer, hammer. You combine that A-tip BC at the velocity of 2850 that Chris and I have been talking about. That 2850 is the butter zone. That puts you in such a sweet spot with some of these better BC bullets that it's just such the easy button. And we always talk 2850, 2850. This
Yeah,
is
I'm
a
looking for that video.
right? You pull that box of
2850.
ammunition out, 2850. And like I said, I grabbed that 120 grain 6.5 Creedmoor from Hornaday, 2850. They know that's the node, but they use 2750 because it's the slow accuracy node. And 2750 and 2850 are a night and day difference. Like 100 feet per second might as well be 200 feet per second because it's that noticeable taking a bullet at 2750 and taking that exact same bullet and putting at 2850. It changes the game for you downrange. So if you guys are working this stuff and you're playing around with your stuff, 2850. And I'll just say pretty much everything we're shooting will put stuff in that 2850 zone without a lot of work. You don't have to push it hard, weird powder, or anything crazy. Accuracy in people's guns and those factory guns, that 2750 is like where everything is. Get a box of 6.5 Creedmoor. It's going to be 2750. You know what I mean? Get these things. That 2750 is an accuracy node that works in a lot of guns. Once they start moving up in speed, accuracy becomes harder in some of those rifles that don't have better barrels. And that's why I've been saying with the PXT bullet, no, not really. Like 2800's okay. You can get away with 2800. Like 2800 is better than 2750, but like 2850 to me really is where you want to be. And like I know guys do well 2775, 2750, even with like the 153s at 2650. To
Hear the
me,
trees.
those guys are working harder and have a little bit more experience than the average, so they do well with it because they're living with it. But if you yeah, they are a bit separate. Yeah, there's a difference, but as you get closer to the 2850, it really becomes that another level. Like 2800 is good. 2850 is excellent. You know what I mean? Now, if you go to 2900, it's good. You know what I mean? It's excellent, good. But there's a little bit of trade off. It depends on what you're shooting, but almost everything. Even if you take a 338 with a little heavier bullet, if you get that guy at 2850, it'll work. Like the 300 grain 338 was 2750, and that's why it doesn't work. You know what I mean? But if you can get that 300 grain bullet to 2850, changes the game. Why they wanted to do Normas and why they were looking at the 338 Norma, because it gives them that little extra velocity over the Lapua Magnum. And so the Norma Magnum is that bit more, so 2850 becomes easier to load, but 2850 is a sweet spot. And these arcs just proved it. You get a 6 arc with a good BC bullet, 2850. It's next level, man. It was so good. So I just wanted to bring that.
I just dug up that video. I
Which
texted
one?
it to you. The 2850? Oh, I gotta check it out.
Oh, what, you when you were like a 6mm at 2850? Wait, another 6mm at 2850? Hold on. Wait, one more 6mm at 2850? Yes. And that's why they do it. That's why they push at 28 to 2850. You know what I mean? That's why every one of them are trying to get that speed out of those 6mm. And the arc is no different. If you take an arc, get it to go 2850, you got everything else everybody's talking about, like Chris is saying. 6mm going 2850. Does it really care what case was behind it? Does it?
Who knows? I don't
Right?
think so.
Does it matter what case you got pushing it by? If every case we're talking about pushes the same 6mm to 2850, does the case matter? Maybe to load, maybe to magazine feed, maybe to spend money on in your rifle system where if they don't have a factory offering. But if they got a factory offering rifle with a 6mm that goes 2850, what more do you need?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that we could say just like that. Like at 500 yards, does a SD of 2 outperform an SD of 20? Probably not. I would pick group size over SD for that distance. But some people are obsessed with.
Yeah, Dorgan's right. Right. You got to work a little harder, Dorgan, but once you get that sweet spot and that accuracy, and then with the 153s going slower, it's a super slow node, so it's easier to reload. It's easier to reload consistently slow than it is to reload fast. Right? You know what I mean? Like, cause that's what your friend was it Ernie? What was his name? The guy who was shooting the 153s out there, and I made him shoot at 1,000 with him. What was the NRL hunter guy you were
Oh,
mentoring?
Ryan?
Ryan,
Yeah,
Ryan,
Ryan.
Ryan.
They were very slow, but he is shooting at a distance where SD does matter. But his SD was stupid good, but it just happens to be how he reloads. So it didn't matter because his groups were tiny to begin with.
Yeah.
153
SD
that
does
slow. I
matter, but
mean,
the guys
you do have to be
reloading
careful.
chat are tiny numbers. Most of the guys reloading for that stuff is tiny. And like I said, the 6 arc, everything out of my bolt gun was an SD of 7 or less. And when I did it this weekend, my SD out of the 80 grain factory was 4. I had an SD of 4 from factory ammo. And then the Lapua. Remember when I shot the Lapua 123 out of my rifle? The SD was 3.6 factory Lapua 123s. I'll never reload that good, but Lapua shoots them in the slow node. I have to be prepared, although it was 2,900 with the 123. So I had 2,910 with an SD of 3.6 out of Lapua factory. And then your SD doesn't show up until that 1.2 to 1.5 time of flight. So where does 1.2 roughly with your rifle, right in that 1.2 to 1.5 is when you start to see the SD appear. Isn't
Yeah, I
that what
mean
you
it does. Like I mean, before I was saying if you're shooting 1 second and in, I wouldn't even think about it. If you're shooting outside of a second, you're going to see it open up. But where we measured it at 1-2, there was visible vertical. Between 1-2 and 1, obviously the vertical grew, but how much it grows and the target sizes we're shooting is another factor. We saw something like 17 inches at 1.2 But at 1 second, the group was 4 inches, 5 shots.
Yeah,
With the SD was like 26. So I mean, it was ridiculously bad. But between one
exactly,
and one two,
exactly.
it opened up like crazy. Like,
Well, and that's where you want to know. And I talked about that in class. Um, yes,
I mean, it
SD does
doesn't
not come
take
into play
effect.
until after a second or more. You need
Well,
time for that to work on the bullet.
hang on, because there's obviously like this goes on the permanent record. The standard deviation is always present, always. The instant it comes out of your barrel at a different speed, the SD is there, which is why the chronographs pick it up. It's going so fast that gravity, the difference in time it takes to get to a target, is so small that you can't shoot the difference. But bullets slow down as they're going. The lighter ones slow down earlier, right? They're slowing down faster. And so the farther out you shoot, the more time it has to slow down. And the bullets spread out in time to get to a target. And because the differential in time is expressed in vertical impacts. So if a bullet's going slower, it's going to hit lower on a target than a bullet that's going faster. And you'll see the spread represented in vertical. But so the SD is always there. It's just that they're going so fucking fast that the exposure to gravity is minimized. And if we shot paper, you might, if and the shooter had good fundamentals and could keep a perfect group, you would start to see it. But it's very hard to separate the signal from the noise. But after a second, the SD expresses itself in vertical, and you could start to see it. So yeah, it's always there. It's nearly impossible to see in terms of impacts. And if it's less than 0.05 of a mil, who the fuck cares? Like, you're not shooting stuff that small. Your fundamentals aren't good enough to justify SD of 1 until you're way the fuck out there,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, that's
But
why
because he
ELR
said
is all the
didn't know
bullet.
it didn't take effect, like it does take effect, but you got, it's like a train traveling from New York to Chicago is going 100 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's a train traveling at 80 miles an hour, which one's going to get there first? And that time difference is expressed because the one that goes slower is going to fall a hell of a lot farther.
Yeah. And we talked about that a lot in class. You know what I mean? We were talking about because we shot to 1,240 yards. We had a 1,200 and a 1,240. We had a 1,011, 12, 1,240. We talked about the SD. Like Joe's shorter 308, his vertical and his variations were showing up sooner. You know what I mean? Than a 6 mil will. Because think about the 308 at 2650, and when 1 second gets it downrange, how far does 1 second get a 308 at 2650? Now do the 6 arc at 3000. Where does 1 second get that 80 grain 6 arc at 1 second? They're going to be two different numbers. So one might start at 700 yards and the other one doesn't show up till 900 yards. That means at 700 yards with the 308, you'll start to see vertical appear. And then you go to the arc and maybe you don't see the vertical appear until 900 yards. You know what I mean? So that's where you have to understand where your bullet's time of flight is, because that's where that's going to help, is looking at your SD and then looking at where 1 second time of flight falls on the range. Go to your ballistic calculator, go into time of flight, find the 1 second mark, and look at where that is in the world. 800 yards, 900 yards, or is it less or more? And that is a factor of, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Joe was
And
shooting a 16-inch gun at 24.75. You know what I mean? So he's got a 308 at 24.75. His stuff's going to show up well before somebody shooting a 6.5 Creedmoor, even at 27.50. You know what I mean? So once you look at Joe's 16-inch 308 at 24.75 and Ben's 6.5 Creedmoor at 27.50, because almost all our PRs are 27.50, with factory ammo, then like Joe's done at 600 and he's going to see a lot at 700 and problems where, the other guys. So, yeah.
right. So if I mean, just doing the math, ignoring BC, which will be relevant, right? So in a vacuum, 2475 will go 825 yards. Now with BC, we're probably talking 600 yards, but um, hang on a sec. But ignoring the BC issue, um, the 2475 in a vacuum will go 825 yards in 1 second, and a 3,000 feet per second will go 1,000 yards. So 1 second is different,
For both
right? Now,
rifles, right?
and the BC's higher, but it's still going to drag a lot. So I, I would still guess that in reality, it also depends on your density altitude. You're probably still looking at a 600 yardish for a second for the 308. But in a vacuum, just those feet per second can tell you it's going to go farther in 1 second, going 3,000 feet per second. And that's important to know. It's 155 yards different. So, why time of flight matters is that's exposure to gravity. And so, the time of flight is actually what you're holding when you dial your elevation, right? The explanation for what you're dialing is time of flight. If it was going to be more true, it would be time of flight clicks,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know? And but it's translated to something that is mapped out differently. So shooters talk about dope and yards and whatever, but the connection back to time of flight usually doesn't get made. We do because of gravity ballistics, because we talk a lot about things in different ways. But yeah, essentially, all you're doing when you dial elevation is dial for time of flight
yeah, yeah. And even like,
and drag.
mm-hmm. I was gonna say Carson came up to me at the end of the class and said he had his data and with his 6BR, and because he shoots comps, he shoots Pawnee and all that, but he did go through the motion with gravity ballistics in the class, and he said the gravity ballistics data matched his known Kestrel data. You know what I mean? So he was able to do the gravity ballistics, and when he compared the two, they matched up for him. So he made a
Because his calculator was entered correctly.
yeah, yeah.
Right?
But and
Because
that's a big part of it, to make sure, as long as in the gravity ballistics, we show you how to check the calculator's math. We do that drop in mils, and it has to go in a logical order. Point 7 rather grows to point 0.8. Point 0.8 grows to point 0.9. You're dialing from this yard line to this yard line 7/10 up. Then from the next yard line, it's 8/10 up. Then the next yard line, it's 9/10 up. Then it's 1 mil up. Then it's, 1.2 up. Then 1.4 up. Then 1.6 up. And so it goes in a logical order. If you see a hitch or a hiccup in those numbers where you have point 0.8, point 0.9, point 0.8, 1.0, there's a bad number. You know what I mean? Because it can't go down, it has to go up. Yeah, Joe's matched perfectly too for 10.4 mils at 1,000, 105-degree temp, 3,000 feet. Yep.
and it should if you have good fundamentals
Mm-hmm.
and you entered it correctly to your calculator.
Yeah.
But that's an issue that a lot of people have and don't realize, that they either entered something wrong, or their data that they used
Take
for
it easy,
their
Mike. Have a good one.
shooting is just not good because their group is too big.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely, man. And that's the stuff we see. That's what we get to talk about. That's what we learn, and we get exposure to a variety of rifles, a variety of ammo, a variety of shooters. In running the gamut, we can go A versus B, C versus D, A B C versus D E F. We can combine different values that different people bring to the table and see what it looks like downrange. And I'm in glass for a lot of it, so I'm seeing what the impacts look like. I'm seeing where the first round coming out of the gravity ballistics puts that person. I'm seeing, where the holds end up and how it is. So it's giving me a great visual on being able to you know, talk about it, predict it, look at the different variations. And I pick up patterns. I'm a pattern and trend person. The pattern starts to lay itself out, the trends start to follow a certain, pattern for me, and boom, it's like I got it. Now my brain's in pattern mode, and we're up and running. But it was a really great time with the guys. Joe, we had a great class. It was so much fun. We all hung out together. Dinner at Jake's house on Saturday night, although it was so hot, trying to eat giant ribeyes was a little tough, but we managed to get them down. But Jake puts on a heck of a spread at JM Precision over there. And like I said, everybody just got along famously. We had really good guys in the class and just had a lot of fun. So it was an excellent weekend for all of us. I gave away a lot of stuff too. I gave away t-shirts, I gave away books, gave away stickers. I gave challenge coin. Friggin' students in this class friggin' walked away with all kinds of stuff. They had the new t-shirt. I had all that stuff. They were all so really good time. All right, man. We're in our hour and a half or so. Everybody's getting ready to go, and I gotta go and getting late and do that.
I gotta make dinner and stuff. But watch the video I sent you. It's oldie but a goodie. You should
I'll
probably
pop it up.
repost it,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
you could repost it.
yeah.
But
I could repost. I'll repost it.
it should go on the hide. It's not on the hide, and I
I'll
still
put it.
gotta
I
do
could put
that
it
stuff.
up in the flicks. I'll put it in the flicks. But we appreciate you guys coming out and following us and following the hide and the lessons and what we're doing. And got some stuff coming in. I got to run to the VA tomorrow on GA Precision. I got stuff. Outler sent a suppressor over. Um, And so we even shot craft sticks, man. Everybody shot the sticks there. We were shooting craft sticks on the line. I brought the tripod
Craft
with
chucks
craft chucks. The chucks?
are, yeah, it's the only hack that avoids fundamentals, that makes shooters just hit what they're trying to shoot at, which is great when the shot matters. But
Yeah, yeah. The chucks were amazing. I used the chucks. Loved the chucks. Had the chucks on my rifle or on my tripod and went to town. And then I picked up, because we went to the range on Monday, I picked up all those other tripods. I think I'm gonna throw the
yeah,
chucks on them lighter hunting tripod, and I'll try to.
yeah,
Although I need to get a trigger cam again. I hate my trigger cam's broken, and I don't like it. I need a new one. I'm not a fan of them, but maybe I could just get away
I
with it.
I have one, but I also, fuck, I gotta get you the pads. I'm putting together craft chuck boxes, so if I can get people to order more, they'll now have. I'm gonna put two of the ones for the super thin ones rather than four, and then four of the thinner ones, because it also helps with slip till there's some more feedback on them. And then, but they're getting put together. But now they're going out with the pads, and I want to get you those pads.
Well, just can you stick
Could
them in
could
an
you text me
envelope?
your address?
Yeah,
Well,
I'll
just
text you.
text me your address,
I
and
will. I'll do
I'll
that.
put a
I'll do that
shitload in
tonight.
there. I'll give you extras so that you could have them for all the, and you can mess with them because if
And
anything
I
needs to be
have that
altered.
old pig saddle, the green and black pig saddle, that's like an old camera tripod. I can even demo on how to bring life back to your old tripod that might have a large wobble zone, and then use the chucks with them. You know what I mean? So I want to do both that.
I've
So
I've never shot him from a hog saddle.
I have the hog
I'm gonna
saddle
go on
too.
the line. Yeah, I'm gonna go on the line and I'm gonna say with craft chucks, I bet you won't be able, given the same tripod, I bet you won't be able to tell which one had the hog
You
saddle.
know what? If you go to the range to pick up some more of your stuff,
Yeah, I have to. Dorgan's here. I said, hey, because my car can't hold very much. So I was like, will you come out and because he does hunter matches? I was like, we can put the deer on his range, but it just my car can't hold very much. It bottomed out the shocks, and I was like, fuck. Remember the dude from California that got high centered?
yeah, yeah.
I almost high centered my car. I
Holy
was like,
shit.
fuck. So I drove up on the side. So I got to go back out, and
Well,
I
if
got to
you go
convince Dorgan
in
to go too.
on the first rack, the first black rack in the middle shelf, there's that old kind of like a toolkit thing. There is a field ops saddle that's really kind
Oh,
of like Wango. It's really loose. So if you get that field ops saddle out of that bin and use that, that is not anywhere near as good as a really right stuff vice or even a hog saddle. It's like a lesser hog saddle, and try that. So there's one out at the range right there in the first shelf, halfway down in that blue bin. There's a field ops saddle. Try that with the tripod with your the chucks, because um that is really a not a amazing saddle.
yeah. Because I'm curious about it, but I'm thinking that rather than buy expensive tripods, like I think this will make all tripods
Better.
totally functional.
Yeah, better for
But
sure. So I'll get you the address when we get off. But thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for being part of the Everyday Sniper. Chris. Alrighty. I'll talk to you later, man. We're
okay.
out. Out.